Katubio-tsagasi, Nayom, my name is Mo Fisher. Welcome back to the Lost Holotapes, where we explore the Fallout Wasteland lore from a bird's eye perspective. Today we will begin exploring the Mojave Wasteland, as presented to us in the legendary Fallout New Vegas, by delving into the details of the entire sequence of events that led to the NCR Legion War, culminating in the Battle of Hoover Dam in 2282. I don't want to spend too much time describing the significance of Fallout New Vegas for the series and the gaming industry as a whole. I'm sure you realize that without me necessarily pointing that out. While dissecting the storylines and historical lore of New Vegas, I expected flawless script execution. However, ever such a legend had something to criticize. Still, compared to Fallout New California and Fallout Frontier, the game's narrative was top-notch, with almost all factions and settlements existing in the cohesive ecosystem rather than a vacuum. Don't forget to support the channel with likes, comments, subscriptions and complete views. Lately the channel had been showing good growth dynamics, and of course it wouldn't have been possible without your help. So thanks to everyone and bon appetit to those who made sandwiches in anticipation of spending the next half hour in my company. As always, when introducing a new wasteland, let's talk a bit about its geography. The Mojave Wasteland, located in the southern part of the state of Nevada, has an intricate shape and borders the California Wasteland through the Mountain Pass, Nevada through the Ship Range, Utah through the Mojave Valley, and the Sonora Wasteland through the Colorado River. I've mentioned before that the specificity of the Bethesda Fallout era is the scaling down of wastelands and a denser saturation of territories with people, factions, and settlements. The four wastelands like Mojave appear relatively small and crumpled. The main subregions of the wasteland are New Vegas, the immediate agglomeration of Las Vegas, Misc Valley, Big Empty, the territory of the Big Mountain Research Facility, the Divide, the area of the Amargosa Valley. There are also slightly less canonical regions such as the North Road, North Desert, Moapa Valley and Badlands. By less canonical I mean regions introduced in fan-made modification. I was pleasantly surprised that the world of fan-made creativity based on Fallout New Vegas is not limited to major titles like Fallout New California and Fallout Frontier. I had to personally sift through Nexus and other modding platforms to prepare for analysis over 300 mods, from which I selected around 10-15 that vividly enrich the history of the Mojave Wasteland and beyond. For instance, there is a mod that expands the lore of the Powder Gangers, Jackals and Vipers, who didn't receive adequate attention in the vanilla version of the game. There is a mod that turns the Cottonwood Cove assault into a second front with all the initiative's wings. There are mods that introduce events which unfold after the Battle of Hoover Dam. However, to avoid overwhelming with new characters and locations, we'll be discussing the lore of these mods in separate episodes. Nevertheless, I will start incorporating the lore of Fallout Frontier into the narrative now, as its lore is not isolated and the events leading to the War for Portland began in the Mojave. Before delving into the chronology, it's important to talk briefly about two things: Robert House and Hoover Dam. Hoover Dam was a secret bio-laboratory where attempts were made to create viruses against the Chinese population. In the 2050s, a sabotage occurred at Hoover Dam, leading to the successful but contentious Chinese theft of experimental virus samples. Pursued by US agents, they reached Denver, where they released the virus, starting the blue flu epidemic. Robert House is a crucial character in New Vegas lore. At 22, he owned numerous casinos in Vegas, founded and directed Robco. We'll skip the details of his biography, but the key point is that he predicted the onset of nuclear war and prepared for it. Using his earned wealth, he installed defense systems in the city, created an army of Securitrons, and had a hibernation chamber installed. He connected himself to the casino's mainframe, essentially ensuring eternal life. On October 23rd of 2077, a platinum chip was supposed to arrive at the casino. It was a shortage device for a new version of House's operation system. However, war broke out earlier than expected, and the chip was never delivered. While most missiles were intercepted en route to Vegas, a small portion hit the city and its surroundings, damaging the casino's generators. Robert had to revert to an even earlier version of the system, and he fell into a coma. Some were luckier than Mr. House and found refuge during the war in Vault Tec Vaults, though the term luck is debatable. In the Mojave there were 8 Vault Tec Vaults, the highest concentration in a single wasteland. Vault 3 is a control vault in the southern part of Las Vegas in Sandy Valley. Vault 7 is an experimental vault with a complete absence of medical personnel. Vault 11. Residents were informed upon entering the vault that they must annually choose one among them as a sacrifice, or the vault's computer would kill them all. The experiment was known by the first overseer, who proudly announced it to the crowd. As a Vault Tec employee, he became the first lamb by unanimous decision. After getting rid of the overseer, the vault dwellers had to choose a new one, and thus began the tradition that the selected overseer would serve only 1 year before being sacrificed to the techno-gods. Vault 19 with its inhabitants was divided into two sectors, Red Sector and Blue Sector, with limited interaction between the two groups. Each sector had its own overseer. The experiment aimed to create distrust between groups without the use of substances or violence, relying solely on social psychological methods. Over the years and generational shifts, the Vault society became completely divided into two factions. Two factions in a confined space would inevitably start feuding, especially since Vault Tec overseers were instructed to create malfunctions and other unpleasant situations, allowing people to blame each other. Vault 21, located directly on the strip in Paradise, had a fitting experiment: gambling. All disputes and decisions in the Vault were settled through poker or blackjack. Scientists in Vault 22 conducted agricultural experiments. The task was to create special fertilizers and develop new plant varieties with increased resistance to diseases, drought, and insects. Vault 24, located in Henderson, had the experiment of very slowly filling the vault with concrete, room by room. Vault 24 was introduced in the lore of Fallout New California, which provides several conflicting variations of the experiment and vault location. For example, one note introduces the absence of any instructions and staff as part of the experiment. Still, we'll stick to the concrete variant, as it plays a role in the Fallout New California exposition. Vault 34, according to Fallout New California, is in Henderson, but geographically likely in Whitney. As part of the experiment, the Vault's arsenal had a vast amount of weapons and recreational areas, but almost no residential sectors. The goal was to increase the population and develop a culture of warfare, leading to a civil war for living spaces. Now let's talk about other shelters. There was Big Mountain Research Center west of Vegas. Unrestricted by moral scientific research and inventions were conducted here, using both humans and animals as test subjects. They created new types of weapons, mutagenic substances, autonomous combat suits, robots, lobotomites, mutants including Night Stalkers and Castors, and more. Within this complex there was even a concentration camp called Little Yang Z, where Chinese prisoners of war and US citizens of Chinese origin suspected of espionage and subversive activities were taken. Explosive collars were attached to them. When the war happened, the prisoners survived but turned into ghouls. Due to the collars, they couldn't leave the camp and remained there to live. The group of scientists, the think tank, responsible for these inhuman experiments, rid themselves of their bodily forms by transforming into robo-brains to continue research indefinitely. At some point, one of the robo-scientists realized the madness of his colleagues. To prevent them from leaving the center, he hacked their systems, disabling their perception of time and place, erasing segments of memory and personalities, turning them into vegetables. He convinced them that giant robo-scorpions were outside, preventing them from daring to leave their improvised prison. He himself moved to another building, but, tormented by guilt, subjected himself to the same procedure. Remembering something about robo-scorpions, he began producing them. This is how the robo-scientists started fighting each other and simulating active research activities. The suburban area of Vegas, Boulder City, survived after the bombing. The town of Ashton, unlike its real prototype, didn't become a ghost town. Judging by abundance of overpasses and skyscrapers, it was a fairly large city in the Amargosa Valley. Next to it was a huge underground military base and, at the same time, a storage facility for nuclear warheads. On the surface, a fictional military town called Hopeville was built over it. In October, Ashton saw large protest marches by hippies against the existence of the military base, especially in such proximity to a major city. It's unknown if the valley was a bombing target during the war, but the warheads were not detonated. Nevertheless, with the collapse of society, nuclear winter and other post-nuclear life factors, both hippie and military groups devolved into the Die-Eat and Starve-Sec tribes, whatever that means. During the evacuation to Vault 7, a conflict arose at the entrance. A guard refused to let the pregnant nurse in because that could compromise the experiment, and his blood was spilled. Ben Eldridge, her husband, killed him and sent his pregnant wife, the nurse, inside instead of himself. He remained outside, unable to appear in bloodied clothing. The hermetic doors closed, and Ben faced a nuclear explosion on the surface. However, he did not perish, but turned into a ghoul, wandering the Wastelands for the next 200 years. Considering that there were 16 skeletons in Vault 11's sacrificial chamber, the Vault's history lasted no more than 16 years. Between 2077 and 2092, 6 democratic blocks were formed, each nominating a candidate for Overseer every year, but of course not from their own block. They were the Allied Service Workers Block, Justice Block, Human Dignity Block, Divine Will Block, Utilitarian Block, and United Vault Technicians Block. The leaders of the strongest block, Justice Block, raped Catherine Stone in the Vault, threatening her that they would nominate her husband as Overseer if she started rallying the people against them. Nevertheless, they still nominated her husband, and then she took matters into her own violent hands. After the massacre, she was elected unanimously as a new overseer. Catherine immediately issued a directive banning voting, aiming to establish a system of random overseer selection by computer to end the feud between the factions. However, Justice Block didn't relent, sparking an armed revolt. A civil war erupted in the Vault, and only 5 people survived. In despair, they decided not to choose anyone and let the computer kill them. Instead, the computer issued a congratulatory message. The true goal of the experiment was revealed. Instead of sacrificing someone for the sake of their survival, the inhabitants had to show humanity and refused to make a choice. The computer declared the experiment is over and opened the vault doors. However, this plunged the surviving 5 into much deeper depression. Upon leaving the vault, 4 committed suicide, while the 5th threw away his gun with a heavy sight and walked into the Wasteland. Presumably on September 1st of 2093, Vault 19 perishes. Whether there was a civil war or not is unknown, but in any case, the vault was abandoned after sulfur dust from the mines began to infiltrate the vault through the ventilation system, reacting with water to form acid that started dissolving the steel structures. Between September 20th and November 15th of 2095, 28 people from Mexico arrived in Zion Canyon, where they established the Paradiso camp. A lone survivalist, Randall Clark, had been living in Zion for 18 years up until this point, started secretly helping the group by leaving supplies, including medical items. 2096, early February. In Vault 22, scientists were experimenting with a fungus designated to kill pests. However, as usual, the fungus started spreading through the air and entering the ventilation system, began infecting people. The infected were starting coughing heavily and dying within 10-20 days. After death, they reanimated as zombies controlled by the fungus, attempting to spread spores through them. The vault dwellers initially tried to isolate the infected on the lower levels, then attempted to burn them, but their numbers kept increasing. Eventually, only 118 survivors remained, and they had to abandon the vault. Unfortunately, some of the evacuees were also infected. The group of survivors from Vault 22 reached Zion Canyon on February 11th and set up camp. Only upon entering Zion did they discover Paradiso. A conflict erupted immediately, during which all Mexicans were killed and a few were taken prisoner, who were eaten by February 14th. In anger at the Kaffers, as he called them, Randall Clark hunted them down. In the first 10 days, Randall Rambo killed about 20 people from ambushes, and over the next 11 months, he reduced their numbers down to 34 people. Some simply turned into spore carriers, but luckily Zion wasn't a popular place for wanderers, so they couldn't infect the entire world and cause a zombie apocalypse. On January 13th of 2097, the Kaffers left Zion and headed southeast. They might have perished due to the virus, or they might have survived and settled somewhere. For the sake of the narrative, let's assume they died. One of the Kaffers, a girl named Sylvie, escaped her group but fell into Randall's bear trap. He showed compassion towards her and helped her recover, after which she chose to stay with him. On September 9th of 2100, Randall Clark travels to the pre-war town of Tuckerville, Utah, to find medicine for Sylvie, his pregnant wife. On March 5th of 2101, Sylvie dies during childbirth along with the newborn. Randall tries to shoot himself but can't muster the courage, and there's little whiskey left in the bottle. There was a settlement called the School, run by the so-called principal. On April 25th of 2123, 24 children aged 8 to 14 escaped from the school and came to Zion Canyon. Randall Clark helped the children in any way he could, but never appeared in person before them. He would occasionally leave medical and survival books, supplies and messages, testaments on the walls. The children started calling him father. Eventually, they evolved into the Soros tribe, and Randall became a deity to them. Their settlement is called the Narrows. And just for those who haven't caught up, Katubio is a greeting in their invented language. The next year, Randall Clark died at the age of 70. 2138, Robert House wakes up from his slumber in his Lucky 38 casino, and oh, what a brave new world. He discovers that his control over Vegas and its systems is quite limited. Without the platinum chip, he can't do much, so he starts hiring prospectors to search for the coveted artifact. Money is not an issue for House. In 2280 alone, he will spend over 800,000 caps for survey parties. Considering the age of some characters, it can be inferred that the towns in the Las Vegas metropolitan area, Freeside and Westside, were established before 2231. 2231. In Vault 34, a revolt occurs, starting with the Overseer locking up the arsenal, predicting conflicts due to a lack of mattresses. What he didn't anticipate was that the conflict would arise due to a shortage of weapons. One group of vault dwellers attempted to force the Overseer to restore access to weapons, demanding the right to self-defense. Upon being denied, they initiated a rebellion. Eventually, they broke through to the exit, left the vault, and went to the Nellis Air Force Base. In Nellis, they found a substantial amount of BFGs, which they could now use. They developed a particular fondness for the found mortars, which they began using to repel anyone approaching their territory. The faction with a culture based on xenophobia towards outsiders and love for large elongated firearms proudly calls themselves the Boomers. On September 22nd of probably 2240, a civil war breaks out in Vault 24, leading to a group of Vault dwellers leaving, including the underage Ben Kurtz, one of the future companions of the Starkid. The group of Vault dwellers was not able to enjoy the fresh air for long. They were attacked by cannibals, possibly those who would later become the White Glove Society. Only 3 children survived, including Kurtz, and even then 2 of his companions perished. By 2244, Kurtz will reach Cajon Pass and join the California tribe, but we've already talked about this in the previous episode. Before 2242, the Fiends, a raider gang known for their extreme drug addiction and recklessness, established themselves as a sizable faction in South Vegas on the ruins of Sandy Valley. On October 5th of 2242, Water Chip of Vault 3 malfunctions. Water Chip seems to be the weakest and most unreliable component in all Vault's design. The Vault dwellers open the vault and venture outside. They managed to establish trade with the local residents, but after only 2 weeks, the Fiends who lived nearby attacked the vault, seized it and killed everyone inside. Untrained and unarmed Vault dwellers couldn't make a stand. The Fiends expanded their territory, and Vault 3 became their impregnable fortress in the center of it. The Enclave is present not only in California but also in the Mojave. However, here the Enclave only controls their refueling station for their vertebrates. According to the concept of a stretched evacuation timeline, the Enclave cell in the Mojave will abandon its post and head east after 2242. A small group of jackals arrived in the region before 2253. It's unknown if they were part of any tribe before or if they were connected to the jackals in Cajon Pass. Judging by the age of characters, another settlement forms before 2253, North Vegas Square. On September 22nd of 2254, Vault 7 either perishes or is abandoned. Prior to 2260, the Mojave Wasteland seized the founding of the towns Nipton, Good Springs, and Prim, on the sites of pre-war towns with the same names. Before 2261, NCR Rangers decided to visit the remote colony of Retelling on the Baja California Peninsula. They discovered that the town's residents were defending themselves by shooting at travelers who wanted to drink from the well around which the settlement was formed. Retelling was doomed, and the Rangers developed a fake story about a raid by 100 raiders while escorting the colonies back to the NCR, where they founded the town of Anza Borrego near Dayglow. Also before 2261, a settlement named One Pine appears on the ruins of the town of Lone Pine, California. There is something to know about the Midwest. Somehow an enclave cell in Chicago deep within the territory of the Brotherhood of Steel remains active. Their base is Vault 112, is active by 2261, which we acknowledge from Fallout New California. It is hard to tell if this cell will still remain active by 2277, as an enclave scientist from Capital Wasteland will send an eyeball through Chicago, though it is unknown if it was able to get maintenance by Chicago's cell. After the events in the Cajon Pass region, the Starkid begins a career as a courier in the NCR. It is known that the courier played a key role in saving the residents of Ashton and Hopeville. Perhaps by 2261, the cities were facing starvation, and thanks to the courageous courier, some food supplies were secured. The settlements were destined to become part of the NCR, but it's unclear how fast assimilation occurred and when it actually took place. After the NCR ousted the Raider alliance from the Cajon Pass region, a gang of raiders crossed the Dune Sea into Sonora to pledge allegiance to Caesar. Somewhere halfway, the jackals separated from the refugees and headed to the Mojave. At least that's how I justified their presence in the region in 2282. Staying true to their traditions of intrapolitical crisis, the Brotherhood of Steel sends one of their elders to create a new cell when conflicts arise within the Elder Council. Elder Elijah is sent to the Mojave. The new regional cell seized the pre-war Hidden Valley bunker, Bunker 13 by the Colorado River, and then the Helios 1 solar power station, which could be used as a weapon since it was linked to the Archimedes system, part of which was a space station with a death ray. 2270. Traversing the path through the Dune Sea, the NCR returns to Bullhead City and drives the Great Hunts out of it, avenging the massacre from 17 years ago. Successfully leading the military campaign that resulted in the city's capture, General Aaron Kimball becomes a national hero, eventually helping him get elected as president. I think this victory was crucial for the NCR's propaganda machine, since they reclaimed their settlement, not just from anyone, but from the faction that had been haunting children in Shady Sands before NCR even existed. Fallout Frontier takes an interesting turn, claiming that Fort Aradesh is being constructed in Bullhead City. It was previously believed that Fort Aradesh was an NCR outpost slightly farther from Camp Willow, which fell along with it as the Legion advanced toward Hoover Dam. At the same time, it created the impression that its significance compared to Camp Willow was almost negligible, since character including those in mods, always refer to the destruction of Camp Willow, but never mention the fall of Fort Aradesh, although theoretically it should play a powerful ideological role as indicated in Van Buren concept. Moreover, it is known that Bullhead City will be abandoned by the NCR when the Legion approaches. And now it turns out that by placing Fort Aradesh in Bullhead City, Fallout Frontier puts everything in its place. Two events that were not detailed enough, the fall of Fort Aradesh and the fall of Bullhead City, are combined into one event. As for the Huns, they move north and settle on the ruins of Vegas. In addition to the forward outpost on the eastern shore of the Colorado River, the NCR needs a forward base on the way to the Mojave. Considering that the Mojave outpost will appear in 2 years, Long 15 must be the forward base in 2270. Before 2271, another unnamed tribe appears in Freeside. One of its members discovers the culture associated with Elvis Presley's impersonation. He introduces this theme to the tribe and they embrace the idea, becoming the Kings. Overall, they are hard to call a gang, but rather militia, as they act as a regulatory body in Freeside, caring about the safety and prosperity of the settlement, although they are not authoritarian rulers of the city. Their base is the School of Impersonation. Mojave Express opens a branch in the town of Primm. In Utah, the Sun Dog tribe is destroyed around 2271, considering the age of the leader of the invaders, Legionnaire Dead Sea. The time has come to decide the fate of settlements exclusive to Fallout Sonora. Assuming that by 2271 the Legion had displaced the Rangers, we have the following. The Legion, moving west, absorbed the Painted Rock and Hydebarks tribes. Lanius, the chief warrior of the Hydebarks, agrees to become Caesar's legate if allowed to slaughter all the men of his tribe for surrendering to Caesar without a fight. He personally deals with his tribe, marking the beginning of his career in the Legion. Additionally, the Legion conquered the Buckeye tribe. In a battle that was extremely challenging for the Romans, they managed to force the tribe to retreat and take refuge in a building, which they were defending for 3 days. Two legionaries infiltrated the building, locked the door from the inside, and Vulpes Inculta, one of the future Frumentari in the war for the Mojave, set the building on fire. Burning flesh and screams of agony filled the air. 200 people from the remaining tribe were absorbed into the Legion, while the wounded and those resisting were sent to feed the vultures on crosses or worse. The Buckeyes were enemies not only to Legion, but also to the Painted Rock tribe, also conquered by the Legion earlier. Many Legion veterans came from the Rock, so they were fierce in the battle against the Buckeye. Although the Legion tries to erase the history of conquered tribes, this battle was crucial in its history, and many legionaries talk about it in private conversations. We know very little about the tribes conquered by the Legion, and this topic leaves ample room for expositional feeling, so I am satisfied with this story. Perhaps someday we will complete the list of all 86 conquered tribes. The Yavapai tribe in the settlement of San Brahmin, which was under the protection of the Rangers, is destroyed by the Legion. Most likely the Legion will leave the functioning settlement as a Brahmin farm, but the tribe as a faction and the Rangers based there are annihilated. The California tribe, which left Cajon Pass after the events of 2261, also faced misfortune. Having survived in Arizona for only about 10 years, they were found by the Legion. Ben Kors agreed to join the Legion on the condition that his fellow tribesmen would at least be assimilated, but while he was on the campaign, they were enslaved. Dissatisfied, Ben of course started a fuss, and they quickly dealt with him, putting a collar around his neck. Moving further west, the Legion approaches the Rangers' base, Parker Dam, and the town of Aqueduct. Since this is now a speculation based on 2 lore sources, we can use our imagination to picture what happened there. Part of the logic of the subsequent events will be indirectly confirmed by the Havasu Blues mod, which was included in the narrative of the Lost Holotapes. So, Parker Dam and the town of Havasu Spring, renamed Aqueduct after resettlement post-war, are located on a cape where the river makes a crooked turn. The geography of the area cuts off any possibility of evacuation to the east, north or south, leaving the only path to safety through the dam. It is logical to assume that the Legion completely blocked the Rangers on the cape and simply suffocated them with their onslaught. The Rangers held the dam siege, while the civilians from Aqueduct evacuated to the west bank of the Colorado River. Following them, unable to hold back the Legion, the Rangers retreated, blowing up the dam behind them and cutting off the Legion's ability to pursue and break into California. Perhaps some sacrificed themselves by staying on the east bank, buying time for the retreating forces. In the end, the refugees found themselves in the Dune Sea. The caravan of refugees and the Rangers went north into the Mojave along the river on the western coast, and possibly reached Havasu Lake, as the road along the western Colorado River would have passed through there, considering the existence of the bridge introduced in the mod. And then they followed the path to Hoover Dam and met the NCR in the Mojave, warning them of the orange threat from the east. It is also possible that on the way they visited Villa and Garage City, warning their residents of the impending danger. In any case, the settlements would have perished later, before 2277, when the Legion moved further northwest. 2271, the Desert Rangers, having lost everything they had, were absorbed into the NCR and became part of the NCR Rangers. In theory, the consolidated force of Rangers and the NCR army has a better chance of resisting the Legion. To commemorate this alliance, a monument was erected at the entrance to the Mojave from California. This concludes the first part of the analysis of the Mojave Wastelands history. You will greatly help the project by liking, subscribing, sharing the link with your mom and grandma, and all of that. Next time we will continue the lore breakdown of Fallout New Vegas and touch upon the period of NCR's entrenchment in the Wasteland up to the first battle of Hoover Dam. That's it for today. Don't accidentally leave all your caps at the casino on the strip, and then I'll see you in the Wastelands, Wanderers. End of the holotape.